Hello, friends. This is Anthony from Force Ghost Conversations. Are you looking to get into the podcast game yourself? Well, if you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, let me tell you, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has some tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Then, when hosting on Anchor, you can even distribute your podcast on listening platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more places. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. And get this, everyone, best of all, Anchor is totally free. Just download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and along with Mrs. Force Ghost Conversations herself, Elise King, we're going to discuss the first episode in the Light and Magic documentary titled Gang of Outsiders. Before we get started, I'm inviting you to join the conversation with us. We can be found on Twitter at Force Ghost Pod. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok just by searching Force Ghost Conversations. We look forward to connecting with you on those platforms. Also, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your listening site of choice. Finally, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it's time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Force Ghost Conversations. And yes, back by popular demand, our own Mrs. Force Ghost Conversations will be back on the other side of this segment to discuss the first episode in the Light and Magic documentary series. So before we get into all of that, it's time to discuss some Star Wars news in the Cloud City Gossip segment. Now, first, before we get into the real nitty-gritty of Star Wars news, we have some Force Ghost Conversation news to share with you all. As I alluded in the preamble, we now have a store. Have you been wanting to buy a t-shirt that says Force Ghost Conversations on it? Are you a fan of our logo? Do you want to have it on a magnet that you put on your refrigerator? If so, this is an amazing opportunity, everybody. We now have a TeePublic store. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Go to our websites, go to all of our social media channels. It is available, the link to the TeePublic store, that is, on all of those places. And I can tell you, it's very exciting. Got a lot of positive feedback so far about the merchandise that's available. So be sure to check it out and see if anything is up your alley. You know, they got some baseball shirts, some hoodies, sweatshirts, onesies for the little ones, kids stuff too. It's very cool. We'll be posting some more designs on there as we get further into some of our other topics. So Willow, Indiana Jones, but our main Force Ghost Conversations logo is there for all of your Star Wars needs and purposes. So thanks in advance for supporting the show and for literally wearing your support as you go out and about into the world. Now, on to Star Wars news. It was a lighter news week in the Star Wars galaxy. However, two new books were revealed that are tying into the Star Wars Jedi series, the famous Star Wars Jedi video game series, that is, starting with the first one being Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It came out in 2019, and which will be getting a follow-up sequel, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which is slated to come out sometime in 2023. So the first is The Art of Star Wars Jedi Survivor, published by Dark Horse, which will chronicle the development of the game, collecting concept art and creator commentary in an oversized full-color hardcover. The behind-the-scenes tome will hit shelves May 2nd, 2023. Also, Star Wars Jedi Battle Scars, a new novel from Del Rey written by Sam Maggs, finds Order 66 survivor Cal Kestis leading the Mantis crew on an adventure set between the critically acclaimed Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order game and the highly anticipated Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Now, Star Wars Jedi Battle Scars arrives May 7th, 2023, and we will continue to cover these books as well as any new news announcements from the upcoming game Star Wars Jedi Survivor as they are released. Also, Rogue One, a Star Wars story, is going to be re-released into select IMAX theaters for a limited time in advance of Andor premiering on Disney+. Journey back to when we first met Cassian Andor, as well as the incredible journey that leads up to the events of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. This feature will also include a brief look at the upcoming Andor series, which is very cool and exciting. So check IMAX.com to see where the closest cinema is in your neck of the woods if you would like to get tickets. And with that, everybody, that is all for the news segment this week. We'll be back on the other side of this episode with, or I should say, this break, with our discussion on Light and Magic Episode 1. Okay, everyone, we are back for our discussion of the first episode of Light and Magic, titled Gang of Outsiders. Now, who best to join us on this journey through all the episodes of Light and Magic? You're going to start with us, you're going to be in the middle with us at one point, and you're going to end with us. But who else? Back by popular demand, ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Force Ghost Conversations herself, Elise King. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hello. I don't know if I'm the best person. I have no mechanical engineering, software engineering, construction, no experience that could provide any insight into this documentary, but I liked it.
Well, you like movies and you have a PMP, so
They did need a project manager at one point.
They
desperately needed
a project manager. We noted that from basically the first episode.
I have a lot of ideas.
They got a lot of ideas and creativity, but not a lot of organization to keep it together. Well, Elise, thank you so much for joining us on this journey. How does it feel to be applauded by our audience at Force Ghost Conversations, our trusted listener base that literally begged us to have you back on the show?
I think you're exaggerating it a little bit, but I have to say it was a nice little glow, little afterglow reading those tweets. So thank you, fan base. I think it was like during a weekday too, and I really needed it.
Yeah, it was like at 9:00. You just got home from hanging out with some friends, and look what happened. They love me.
Okay, exaggerating again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was nice. That's all I'll say. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Well, I personally love having you on the show, and I love that we got to go on this journey of light and magic together. And I've got a series of questions here to guide our discussion of the first episode, titled Gang of Outsiders. So, frankly, I just want to start at the beginning. What did you know about Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, before we dove into the series?
I mean, I knew they were just a bunch of geniuses who made things look good on screen. We had watched some behind the scenes documentaries of other stuff on Disney Plus, like not just Star Wars, but Marvel, et cetera, and they come up all the time. Also, like the history of Disney and the history of Disney and Star Wars, like all those documentaries, you see some of the same like people come up again and again and again. So part of it was like, oh my gosh, old faces, old friends.
Yeah.
The other part was like, I knew they were smart. Did I know they were Renaissance people who knew everything? No, I should have though. I should have known that. I mean, the trailer gave me goosebumps.
The trailer was really special. Did you know the extent to which all of the movies and properties that they had worked on to this point that had formulated your life?
Yes, I did know the extent, but I didn't know to the extent to which they created technology. Like, I don't know. We'll probably say this quite a few times when we talk about light and magic throughout the podcast, but I just sat there being like, hold up.
Pause it.
Pause.
We have to dissect what we just saw.
I have to dissect what I just heard to make sure I understand enough to keep watching. Like, I was very impressive.
Very good. Very good. And it was really cool seeing E.T. the other day in IMAX. And staying through the credits, we were able to pinpoint names of people that we had seen both in the documentary and super featured throughout the show. What's in some way, shape, or form, like the group of people that literally created this foundational cinema base and story that has really been impactful in our lives.
Yeah, and I think to that point, that's the good and the bad of this documentary. So warning to what viewers that we left ET and I was like, this looks so good. And I know the tricks behind it now. But then we were watching something else, and I don't know if ILM had any hand in it or not. But then I was like, this doesn't look good. I was much more discerning. And at some point I had to like turn to you and say, all right, I'm taking off my CG hat. I'm just going to watch it for the story, and like, let's hope the story captures it, because as they say in the documentary, like, you shouldn't really see the effects. Effects should just tell the story.
Exactly. It should be a magnifier of the story presented to you, as opposed to all of it being the effects and not story driven. I mean, don't want to hate on it, but we don't really remember Avatar for the story. We remember it for the effects, and that might be the case where the effects outpace the...
Say that loud and proud, because I believe it 100% with my heart. So,
but hey, we're looking forward to Avatar 2 coming out this December. Subtle plug.
Sure.
For the nonprofit organization that is the Walt Disney Company.
Yeah.
I will say, though, it is astounding to me that ILM is they just always pop up all the time. And I will, to this day, I firmly believe that a little bit of the reasoning that Disney was so adamant to buy Lucasfilm in 2012 was that Industrial Light and Magic would be an in-house shop for them for all of their other projects. Look, hear me out in this thesis here, right? Let's say the sale happens in 2012, right? They get that home discount, whatever it is, right? It's in the house.
Yeah.
Look at those Disney films that have come out since 2012. We're talking like Beauty and the Beast was cheap. Like, they were able to make that happen. All the live action remakes.
All the ROI is like
I think crazy. It's there. The Marvel stuff, like, right? It's all in house.
Especially since like everyone in the business, it seems, applauds INL.
I know. Whoa.
My work.
That's something seeping in here.
My work's seeping in. ILM. Like, they were the first. I don't know if they're still the best. I have to think they are for what they do.
They're the only ones that have a documentary about themselves.
Yeah, so I'm going to take that as they're winning the game of this industry. But yeah, I mean, it was a good deal for Disney.
Yeah, agreed. So we're going to transition into some of the other questions I've got here, and they may touch into the spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen Light and Magic, at least the first episode, go watch that. Pause the episode, go watch it now. You will not regret it. Let me tell you that. So then come back to this point in the episode so that you are attuned to everything that we will possibly discuss. Now, Elise, I think one of the great things about this series is that it turned these everyday workers into literal rock stars. And then frankly, this first episode is so foundational. It's really setting the stage for the ILM story, telling you some of the main players that you're going to see throughout at least the early part of the series. What were some of the big players, and perhaps who was the biggest person that stood out to you in this first episode? Just as a reminder, some of the big names were John Dykstra, Richard Edlund, Ken Ralston, Joe Johnston, Lauren Peterson, Phil Tippett, Dennis Muren.
Thank you for giving me the names.
You're welcome.
I wasn't gonna.
I wasn't gonna leave you hanging there.
Phil Tippett, I think, is just so relatable, and I think his journey through ILM is very, very interesting. I mean, he gets into it, I think, in later episodes.
Yeah.
But just why he does what he does, the foundation and like family he found within ILM. As someone who has grown up in like their professional career through small startup nonprofits, it's like the energy that ILM created is the energy you always think you're going to have when you're with a ragtag group of people making the world a better place. And then like a lot of times bureaucracy gets in the way, even in small organizations. But like even the job I have now kind of had that vibe when I first joined. And it's grown to be a bigger organization. And with that comes growing pains and successes and things like that. So it was interesting to just see the foundation of where ILM came from. And I think that's part of the cool thing about all the characters they touch on. It's like you see their professional growth and how that affects their lives. But yeah, Phil Tippett, Dennis Muren, obviously is just, there's something about him that's so zen.
Very zen.
That you just want to lean in and you're like.
Lifelong learner too. Like you respect that in a person.
I don't know. I don't really want to pick anyone because they really all leaned on each other so heavily. They're all super invested in the work, and they are all lifelong learners and Renaissance men. They do freaking everything. Like, I don't know. Did you have a particular person?
Well, I will say that because of my love of Star Wars and these properties and behind the scenes tidbits, like these people weren't new to me, as I imagine some of them maybe were for you.
Yeah.
It was nice to see more John Dykstra because of eventually what happens later, which we'll get to in later discussions. This is like a very unique instance where he's being interviewed and a part of the story. Like he's not a part of other Star Wars documentaries that I've watched.
That's crazy.
Unfortunately, because of, I would say, maybe the fallout that happens and just coming to peace with it. So he's able, at least I'm glad that we're at a point now where he's able to have these very focused and deliberate conversations and be at peace with really what happens.
He does have that rock star personality. It came through even off the screen.
Got the long hair. I mean, very 70s working class vibe in this Van Nuys airport.
It was also interesting for me to see George Lucas in a different light. You know, like
young, stressed out George that is just he's every time they panned him, he's in a corner just like looking like he wants to curl up into a ball.
Yeah, I'd seen like the young pictures. I see him now, but I didn't realize how freaking stressful it was to make this movie.
You felt the stress sitting there.
I don't know how he did 5 more films if it was this stressful. But it was just interesting again as like, oh my gosh, my work is leaking into me. Being a project manager, you really talk about team dynamics and like leadership styles, etc. And it was very interesting to see him not have all the answers, but being able to find the people who could find the answers. I think that is a very important skill to have when you're someone like George Lucas. And I'm glad he trusted his gut and he trusted the people he worked with. But it was interesting to see him from like that boss perspective throughout the series as well.
But clearly project management was needed in order to get it done at the end of the day.
Lucas isn't going to be there day to day. You need someone
that is in like, hey, we have a deadline on Friday. You just can't spend 5 hours in the model shop tinkering around with how this looks.
Yeah.
So the episode is titled literally Gang of Outsiders. How do you feel about that title? Is it appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking now, I'd be like, these guys would be anything but outsiders. Nerd culture's in, anyone and their mother's becoming an engineer, I think. But going back, to all the stereotypes you hear of the 70s and like stuff like that. And even like what people got teased about in the 90s when I was growing up, I was like, I'm sure they're outsiders. Also, they're sitting there and they're talking about ideas in their head that no one can even conceptually realize. Like that puts people either off or the people lean in. And so I could see them kind of getting lost in their own worlds.
I'm sure that happens a lot. They definitely get lost in their own worlds. It was amazing to me to see how much like home footage they had. Like these people in the 50s and 60s using these like home cameras and somehow making these special effects just in their backyards because they wanted to and were inspired by the likes of like Ray Harryhausen and another film, King Kong. It came up so frequently in this episode. And like from us at home to see them do this in like the 50s, 60s and have this like portfolio of cool stuff and stop motion and all that stuff. Whereas I struggle to make a TikTok where it basically does it for you and you're like, push the button, record. How do I edit this together?
Mm-hmm.
All that without the stuff that we have now. I mean, it's almost you take it for granted, but it helps me at home to really appreciate the work that they did and how much pioneers they were. These were people that literally had interests and likes into all these different avenues, car parts, movies, photography, art.
Yeah.
Meld this all together and then whoop, you get ILM.
Yeah, I think it's so impressive. One, because as someone who doesn't know the film industry, doesn't know the tech behind it in terms of, or even like concepts of like what it means to edit film, you know, and how we did it before and how we do it now. Yeah, it was super impressive. Also, these kids were just like getting magazines and reading an article and then like had this burning desire to figure out how to do it themselves. I think they're just such creative problem solvers, and they remind me of Albert Einstein in the sense, like, I was listening to something and they said the best thing about Albert Einstein is that he asked good questions. He was so creative in his questions. And then because he answered questions, then you start just going down a path of trying to figure it out. And that unlocked modern day physics. These people were asking questions about how to do things, how to make things better, how to make things more realistic. And those questions unlocked a whole new industry. And so I think, and they started when they were like 15, you know, it was so impressive. Impressive is the word of the day.
Very impressive. Well, I mean, that's going to be the word of the series, frankly.
Yeah. And like, what did they just say?
Excuse me? Pause that. We need to rewind. Is that what he said there? Super glue? So ILM really in the early days certainly had a unique workplace culture about itself. Do you think that you could have survived or handled that environment knowing yourself today and your preferences?
As I am today in this moment?
As you are today, yes.
See, that's a really hard question. Like, if you had asked me, I did AmeriCorps when I was like 22, 23. And that's a no life. You work from 7 to 7 and your friends are the people you work with. And like, I loved that culture. I thrived in it. I really like feeling like I'm part of something bigger than myself, et cetera, et cetera. Nowadays, I don't know if I'd want that. One, there'd be a lot of pressure to participate. Two, like, relationships just suffer. Like, everything is paused. Everything, every other part of your life is paused. I don't know if I'd want to pause my life now. That being said, at the same time though, like, if you knew you were on the cutting edge of, like, if I knew I was on the cutting edge of something and like changing how the world works, it might be worth it.
It's interesting because I would argue, I don't know if they knew that they were on the cutting edge of changing the world. I think some of them probably just were like, this is a fun job. We'll do this for 6 months and see.
I don't know. I think so. Like,
maybe in hindsight they reflect on it that way, but I don't know if in the moment they were like, this sci-fi picture is going to change the world.
Oh, I don't think they knew what Star Wars was, but I was thinking more of like how John Dykstra was talking about the technology they were building. Like, they were very aware they were building from scratch and that it had never been done before, and there were like barriers being broken.
Yeah, I would say John and Richard knew that they were probably pushing bounds. I don't know if like Lauren in the model shop was really, or Joe, who is like, this took off an hour from my commute in the day. This is why I took this job.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, if it, I don't know, if I was that passionate about the work, I guess that's another angle I could take is like, just that passionate. Like, can you really stop yourself from doing something if you're that passionate?
Yes. Is it possible? Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
I don't know. Would you?
They got. I think I think at their age I could have, because no home. A lot of them didn't have home obligations like families, kids.
Are you calling me an obligation?
No, I'm calling you the best part of my life that I get to have and enjoy each and every day, and that's something I want to be a part of. Right? It's those people are. Wow.
I'm sorry.
Oh boy.
Coffee.
Oh boy. Here we go. It's all on camera now.
Well, it would have been if we knew how to operate one.
We know. Yeah, exactly. We're not these geniuses, ILM. Well, that's what we have a washer and dryer for.
Yep.
In order to get those stains out and all that. Oh boy. All the fun stuff that we record while we do all this. You're hearing it unaltered, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, a lot of these people didn't have like these things at home that like pulls them away, right? They didn't have to take the kids to school and pick them up and take them to soccer practice and all that stuff. So, they were fortunate they were also right place, right time, where they were able to work those 12-hour days, lay the foundation for all this technical work that needed to be done. And it's also like, I don't know. The only thing that I don't think I could have handled is potentially the 100+ degree weather working environment that they had. That's air conditioned space.
Oh.
That may have been my like, do we really like this? Can I do 12 hours a day here? I know they give me pizza once a week, or I don't think they give them pizza at that time, but like I know we have this like slip and slide. Now it's just funny thinking like how nowadays when people are like, what can I do to get people to return to the office? Can I give them a 5-course meal every week or something like that?
Yeah.
Whereas these people are like, we had a slip and slide that my dad bought of an old parachute or some army surplus thing that we turned into a slip and slide, or we bought this like tub from the army surplus store and filled it up with cold water. We take a dip in it at 12 and then go back to work for another 8 hours.
I think the difference is like I think people were finally seeing that they could maybe build careers out of things they loved, which is a very motivating factor.
Yes.
And 2, they're artists. Like that's what artists do.
Yeah.
They do whatever they can to create art. And so like I'm trying to think of an analogy, and I think if like one of your favorite bands was like, "Hey, come play with us," and it's in a warehouse and it's hot. I think if you put yourself in that mindset, you'd be like,
if you're passionate, you believe in it, you will be able to do anything.
Yeah.
But knowing what these people were in for, like let's say Star Wars wasn't a thing yet, you don't have that attachment to it. This is just another sci-fi movie picture that you've been hired for 6 months for. Maybe at month 3 or 4, it may be a little taxing on the body.
Yeah, it would be interesting to learn from them, like what the attrition rate is, right? But also acknowledging that this culture did not stay forever.
Exactly. Yeah, this was very much the first movie.
It's very much a startup.
The startup.
Yeah.
The startup hours and all that.
Yeah.
All right. Great. So, would you say that this is the episode that challenged your perceptions of technology the least? Like you understood for the most part everything that they were putting together. Like this is the one that least challenged your like, what is we had the least amount of pauses, I would say, in this episode.
Yeah, it's a very foundational episode.
Yes.
I'm not going to say I understand it. Again, do I really know how movies are made? No. I'm the kind of person where like I'm not going to know it. But I'm hoping if you explain it to me, I can at least start to grasp it. And here, I was like, oh, they're building cameras. They're building systems to make sure the camera can move. They have to take lighting into account. Oh, they're doing stop motion. Like these concepts I am aware of. And I understand basic things they have, basic A through Z points they have to do to get to the finished product. That is not the case in other episodes. That is not the case. I think I have a better understanding after watching all 6 episodes. I'm not a computer software engineer. I'm not even... My interest in computers goes to The Sims and then it stops.
Yeah.
So, but not that I'm willing to learn new technologies. I'm going to put that out there.
Did you have a MySpace back in the day?
No, I was not allowed to.
I figured if you'd have been allowed to, that would have forced you to become a basic coder.
I've done some basic coding and I hated it. So, but I can sit there and talk to people who are passionate about computers all day because it's infectious.
Yeah, you're a communicator, but to be in the weeds of what it all is, maybe you're in the right profession for what you want to do.
Yeah, I'll learn project management software and that's it.
Yes.
Were you intrigued more by all this stuff? Like, were you like, oh, I could dig into this more? And
Oh yeah, I think in a different life I was in this. I mean, that was one of my potential career choices was film school.
yeah,
So this was stuff I was almost thinking I was going to do one day, and then I
Yeah.
realized I didn't have the wherewithal to want to do all the coding and stuff. I think some of these guys got lucky that all they had to know was car engines, and I mean, not like that, like that's like the easiest thing to grasp either, but it wasn't like car engines plus knowing how to run a superconductor computer and how to
yeah,
the ins and outs of all that AC/DC technology, right?
yeah. I guess I was still impressed though that like it wasn't just like, oh, we know how to operate a camera, we know how to edit,
Yes.
we know how to light, we know how to do stop motion, but it was like we know how to construct. They built computers.
They literally eventually, yeah, we get
Yeah,
later
they
on,
built
yeah.
computer. No, in this episode, he says they were building some computers.
That's
John
episode
Dykstra.
2.
Did you watch 2 episodes
No.
yesterday? Oh, I thought yesterday I heard that they were building some computers.
Not yet.
But they were building cameras. You know, they were constructing things to hold the models up. They were, I mean, that you had to understand engines, construction, like playing around with like physics and stuff like that. I was just like, that's a lot. It's a lot.
It
to
is
know.
a lot. There's a lot. You gotta be the only way you get that is by life experience, and it's just like all these people just spend time in their garages tinkering with
Mhm.
engines and watching movies and reading these magazines, right? It's just like these people
Curious
were
problem
created
solvers.
for this job. You know what I mean?
Yeah, curious problem solvers.
They had this is the one time in their lives where they were able to take all these different mini hobbies that they had and expertises that they had in these areas, and then were able to apply it something functional. Which is when your parents are like, what are you ever going to use this for? How dare you be in this garage spending all this time doing here? You need to get yourself a job. Like, Mom, I am going to get a job one day with this.
They had no idea, though.
They had no idea. They didn't have any idea. Well, you talked a little bit about the camera. The motion control camera was the big tech reveal innovation of this episode. I think they call it the Dykstra Flex. What do you think of this technology? Is it really something that our brains can comprehend the science behind?
Yeah. I mean, it's having the camera move instead of the object, so you can control more of the external factors like light and things like that.
Yeah.
I would say, for me, it's not like I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s. You know, we had smartphones and we have so much technology now. And I've always seen CG in movies and stuff like that, and so it's not like this crazy reveal of, oh, there's a new camera that moves. You know, it's just, on the surface, it doesn't seem impressive, right? Because it's just so basic.
Yeah.
But then you realize they're in an era where super glue wasn't invented. Like,
well, it is, but you just can't get it.
You just can't, yeah, or it's invented, but it's like military grade, or you need to have like...
It's a military secret. You have to go to the Fort Knox in order to get super glue.
Like, it was just, I think, I sit there and I try to think about like original ideas. It's really hard nowadays to think of an original idea, and I can't imagine it was even that much less hard back then. You know what you know, and it's hard to think beyond that and dream beyond that. And these people did. They didn't say like, oh, this is how it worked, or like it could work X, and they had a vision for it. And I think that's also why it's impressive to see George Lucas, because to see his vision. So yeah, I mean, I think it's easy. I don't think it's easy. I think I could comprehend it, and it's
probably the easiest thing that they'll create that is comprehensible.
I consider myself to be average in that sense. So I think what was impressive was just realizing where they were starting from, which was so low compared to what I grew up with.
It's crazy to think that like the special sauce and glue of Star Wars is this camera that moves around the object, right? Like, it's like,
I think it's the next episode or something, but when they talk about how it was so cool to flip the camera or flip the model upside down and go super close to it, and that's how they got to scale, like, that is the kind of problem
for
solving.
the opening scene.
Yeah, that's the kind of problem solving I can understand, because I'm like, oh, how do we make a small object look big? well, we're going to do this perspective, zoom in, have something for reference to trick your mind into thinking it's huge. These are concepts I can follow.
Photoshop in your garage is not one of those concepts at the other end of the spectrum.
I don't know. I still don't know.
Alrighty, Elise. Well, I have one last question about the first episode of the Light and Magic documentary series. Clearly, at the end of this episode, the work is not going well. They have 2 shots that they've presented to George, and the episode ends on an epic cliffhanger, if I will say so myself.
You were so happy.
George Lucas crossing his arms, just looking at the camera and saying, I was not happy. Well, can I do the George voice?
Yeah.
I was not happy. If you were George and everything had been going poorly to this point, both the shoot in England, the visual effects work that is really going to make this all glue together, and you came back and you saw that this is going to be like, all right, at least they probably have some very innovative things done. I'm ready to see this. I'm ready to be wowed. You probably hyped yourself up for the day, got yourself on your special flannel shirt and all that. You combed your hair just the right way. Do
you think he did today, all this?
Oh, yes. You're ready to go. You're like, finally, it's going to be my big break right here. Everything's just going to come together. They got those 2 shots. 6 months of work, half the budget spent. How would you react if you were George in that situation? Would it be the same way?
There's a lot of factors there. One, I think I've never been under that amount of pressure. So I think I would be crumbling anyways. I think at some point in the day, I'm going to the bathroom to cry. Like, I just need to release that tension.
It's okay if George did too. We respect that.
Happy hour would have been all night. That being said, I'd be like, George, did John lie to you about progress?
Mm-hmm.
I want to know.
Yeah, what was the communication back and forth?
Or were you just trusting that happened and there was no one there to make sure it had, because at that point I'm like, George, you dummy. You give a bunch of nerds open
free will,
freedom to do what they need to create this giant sci-fi movie. And you don't have anyone checking in and make sure they're adhering to all the technical, all of the project management stuff. That's silly, George. At the same,
yeah,
but if
oversight on his part, probably.
Yeah, but if there were some communication points and it probably wasn't reflected accurately, then I'd be a little. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm being firm. I don't know. They were very PC in how they talked about this disagreement between John Dykstra and George Lucas. I would be firm. Now, if I were John, on the other hand, I'd be listing out everything we had to create from scratch. To be we have to put good projects, right? You do 60, 70% of the work up front to make the system run smoothly. Now, you're always iterating and you're always trying to make it better. And you don't need to have a perfect product, but for a film, it has to be pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to at least be hey, everything took this. I would be explaining it. I don't think they have the personalities to do that. I think they have personalities where they probably got mad.
And they were men in the 70s that did not communicate with each other.
Would I communicate as a man in the 70s? Absolutely not. That's not who I am. I don't think that's not what I would have been. Would I have been firm? Yes. Do I think they probably just went in saying, figure it out, and then they're like, yeah, sure. I don't want to say they're dumb boys, but I think they were dumb boys. I really do. That being said,
a little bullheaded, probably. Yeah.
George Lucas, you could tell, is still frustrated by that moment. Years
He's lucky that it all turned out correctly, but there's still some it's okay. There's some PTSD almost from having that.
Yeah. I don't know. Would you have?
I think I would probably said exactly. Well, I think there was some audio of younger George, maybe a year later, once Star Wars had come out, and they're maybe doing the first audio documentary or something like that, or an interview and being tell us how this all came together. And he basically tells most of the story where he's like, I went to their office and they showed me this, and he's a bit more frustrated in this. Like the anger is still in this when he's forced to remember all this, and he's like, what have you been doing? That's probably what I would be more like. It would almost be like an uncontrolled, like 30 seconds there of just like, you don't know what's spewing out of you. It's like, what? You're verbally processing everything and just your word spaghettiing across the wall. That's probably how I would do it, where it's like, what have you been doing? Like, what are you all doing? What's this? How are you doing this? What are you working 12 hours a day? Are you just taking ice baths? What's happening here?
Yeah,
And then it'd be
you.
people weathering the storm around it for maybe 30 seconds to a minute. And then I'd be like, okay, we're going to get through this. I needed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I say in an ideal world, I would have been communicating and I would have been a dumb boy, but George seemed like he was under a lot of pressure for months and months and months, and I don't know if that's just his personality or if that's actually how bad the set was. So
the set was, let's just say, not great at all. Like, no one
not great at all. There's no silver lining.
They only talk about the England shoot when they reference like, oh, George is off in England. But there was also the Tunisia aspect from the Tatooine scenes that were just horrendous. The heat, the actors not giving their full attention and 100% effort into it. The effects not working. Poor Anthony Daniels in 3PO in the 100-degree Tunisia weather with all that outfit on. Poor Kenny Baker in the R2 thing is not working. And then to go to London where they're at the studio and the unions get involved, and George is like, I'm under a deadline here to get this film out and done, and I have to go check on the special effects, which hopefully they're working good over there. But their union's like, all right, 5:00, we're done. Monday through Friday, we only do this. And he's like, wait, we need one more shot.
Yeah.
Please. And they're like, nope, union orders.
It sounds like
no overtime.
It sounds like a lot of pressure. But I'm also like, I think, again, like leadership styles, personalities, there are pros and cons to everything. And like giving people free reign to be creative and fail and problem solve is awesome. It also is probably a little naive that that's going to fall under a certain budget, a certain timeline without support. So part of me is like, yeah, that's tough. The other part is like, well, did you do planning?
Yeah. Did you plan? Did you put a plan together? Did you put deadlines in order?
The second thing, the final thing I'll say too is I have to be a little critical just because this is a group of very talented young white men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know it was difficult to make the movie, I think, compared probably to other filmmakers. Again, I don't really know film history, so I could be talking out of my butt on this, but like, he got funding pretty easily, it seems like.
George?
Yeah.
Ooh. He had to shop this around a lot, and if it wasn't for American Graffiti...
That's what I'm saying. Like, he made one movie that people loved. I would say other directors of color...
Oh, I mean, in that regards, he was definitely seen as like the next up and coming big thing in Hollywood, along with some of his other white friends, right?
There was a lot of cash behind. I mean, is the industry difficult in general? Yes. Does it mean he didn't struggle? No. But I'm kind of like, was it one of the easier routes just by the nature of where he went to school and his friends and the cash alongside that group's name? Like, maybe.
Maybe.
It's a larger discussion.
It is indeed. Well, Light and Magic, it's off to an incredible start with this first episode, and it really hooks you on as a viewer. That cliffhanger begs you to immediately go to the next episode, because although we know at home what happens, right? We know Star Wars is a smashing success. We know ILM goes on to... Hopefully they don't have their offices open today on the Saturday that we're recording, but there might be people in there tinkering about. So it's still a working, functioning studio that is very much involved with all the Hollywood projects possible today. But wow, what a great start.
It's such a great human interest story, at least in the beginning. These characters, like, these engineers and these workshop people, like they're so fun to get to know. I
Yeah.
loved it. I was like, oh, I would be excited to meet them at a convention or something.
We tried. They had the Light and Magic panel at Celebration. They were kind of doing like a panel. And they had them all like we did for Thursday.
Yeah.
But we didn't get in that lottery, unfortunately, and that would have been cool.
I guess my point is like I would be just as excited to meet some of them as I would.
Yes, yeah.
Like
now that you have a bit more names to faces and stuff like that,
they'd be really fun to get a drink with and like pick their brain about stuff. Let's just say that.
I'm sure they got stories for days about anything and everything.
They'd have the best small talk.
You'd be like, "Tell me about ET," and they'd be like, "Oh, that putting together the spaceship and all that." Boy, was that some long hours putting that together. And then I'd just be like, well, if I just use some wood sticks and chips and toothpicks, it puts it all together.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we just found this thing called glue that doesn't move.
Yeah, it allows me to put this pencil on the edge of the table just a little bit. And it sticks.
Yeah.
Magic. Time travel.
They really lean into the magic part, and I love it. So highly recommend watching.
Highly recommend checking out the first episode. Elise, thank you so much for joining us on our discussion on the first episode of Light and Magic. To our listeners at home, she will be joining us for episode 3
and 6.
And 6. Okay, I was like 3 and 4. We said the middle, so it's like you're splitting the differences. So it does
3 or
semantics, 4, but we'll just shoot for 3 right now.
Okay.
So back by popular demand, she will be back for more episodes of Force Ghost Conversations to talk light and magic as it gets more complicated.
I'm gonna have less to say.
This is as easy as it gets. You're gonna have I don't know if less to say. You're just gonna keep saying over and over again. What?
I know.
How? Who?
Well, get ready, folks. Get ready for me just asking questions continuously.
Yes. Well, we're always learning here, and that's a lot of fun. That is part of the magic behind special effects. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, Elise, and we look forward to having you on future episodes of Force Ghost Conversations and in the light and magic space.
I love you more than most. Goodbye.
I'm in charge of the recording button here, so I actually get to say love you more than most. Bye.